This late BSA A65 is one that I rebuilt the engine for last year, and the owner took the engine home and refitted it to the bike and set everything up to return it to running order, but he was a bit concerned that when it was warm the oil light was flickering on at tick over, going out when as soon as you rev the engine, but it was flickering at tick over apparently. So I've had it back here and I've checked a few things, and I've got this BSA service bulletin here, which I managed to find on the internet a little while ago, and it's got some specs there for engine oil pressure versus engine RPM, etc. Using BSA 2040 oil. Well, I'm not sure what the owner put in here, but this is some that I caught when I removed the relief valve from the crankcase to check it, and that's cold now, and that seems quite runny, to the point where I doubt whether it's sort of 2040 or 2050. I have a feeling that might be a 1040 or something, but I need to check on that with him, because that could be the culprit. But anyway, when I rebuilt this engine, I fitted new big ends. The crank was all checked and done, and new big end shells put in, sludge strap cleaned out. The timing side bush and journal were within spec, so they were left alone, and a brand new oil pump was fitted, although those SRM type oil pumps weren't available at the time. So the one that's in here is one of those Heparite ones, wherever they come from these days. I'm going to just start the engine up. After we just have a look here, it tells us to expect at normal operating temperature, running between 3 to 4,000 RPM, we want to see 40 to 45 PSI on the oil gauge. So let's have a look. I've run it of course already. I know that we are sort of at the low end of what's acceptable, but I need to find out what grade of oil is in there. Whether we'll be able to see the gauge and the rev counter at the same time. I'm hoping we will. We're right on the threshold of an oil light license, that sort of package. If anything, we're reading a little on the low side there. It wasn't quite hitting 40 at 4,000 RPM there. Wasn't far off. I've already had a look at the pressure relief valve, and that's clean and free. I think I'm going to look into what sort of oil is in that engine. I think that could be the key, because I know that mechanically the engine is sound. It's also extremely hot, mind, because I didn't want to sort of run it when it was perhaps a little too cool, but it certainly probably wouldn't get any hotter than that under normal conditions. But that's where we're at for now. I need to speak to the owner next and find out what oil we got in there. That could be the culprit to this. We'll soon find out. Right, I'm set up for a little experiment here relating to the BSA A65 with the possible low oil pressure issues. And on the left is a sample of the oil that's currently in the frame, in the tank, if you like, for the engine on the BSA. And on the right is some new oil that I've got that I intend to put in and give a try. The one on the left, I've spoke to the owner, is apparently a 2050 grade from Halfords. The one on the right is a 2050 grade by Morris's, which I often use. I started using it for no better reason than it was conveniently available locally, but it is pretty good stuff. But what I'm going to do here is a throwback to when I worked as a marine engineer, and we had this very simple apparatus where you could, it was almost like, I jokingly called it the ski slope, where you'd put, you had two tracks on a little device that stood up at about 45 degrees or so, I think it was, and you could put a sample of new oil in one channel and a sample of the oil you wanted to test in for viscosity in the other channel, and basically they had a race, and you could see if one travelled much faster than the other, that it might be time for an oil change or something. But based on that, that's what I'm going to do here. Now I've got these two tubs with similar amounts of oil in, and they're both propped up at an angle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the prop away and we're going to watch the oil samples race each other to level out. There we go. And we can see that the one on the left is winning. That's almost all the way to the other end now. The new stuff there on the right is just closing in. It's got that area still to fill in, but it's moving quite a bit more slowly than the sample on the left. So that tells me that it's thicker and that the viscosity is greater. So I'm going to try an oil change, and I'm going to put some of this stuff in and see what we got. I'll try and hold the camera and put these back onto the prop and just see whether we can watch the oil run back. You can see the one on the left is moving quite a lot more quickly than the one on the right. That's a quite remarkable difference actually. So my next part of the plan is I'm going to start the engine cold with this oil in it, and we'll get readings off the pressure gauge which I've got fitted to it, and just see what we've got, what pressures we got at the various RPMs. Then I'll drop the oil, then we'll put some of this stuff in. The engine will have cooled back down by then, and we'll give it a try and see if the readings increase, the pressure readings increase with this oil in, and I suspect and hope that they might do. If I can find 5 psi, we would be comfortably within the factory tolerances according to the service bulletin sheets that I've got to refer to. So what I'm going to do now is a cold start with that oil in, see what we got, change the oil, put that stuff in, and hope that we might have slightly higher readings. Right, here I am with this BSA A65, and I can promise you it's stone cold. It hasn't been started since before the weekend actually. I've got my makeshift oil pressure gauge there, and I'm going to cold start it now with its existing, so I'm told, Halfords 2050 oil in it, and we'll have a look at what sort of readings, oil pressure readings, we might get with that in it from a cold start. And then I'm I'm going to change the oil and see if there's any difference with a different make of the same, allegedly the same grade of oil in it. Oop. Doesn't like cold starting, this one. Might have to look into that, but one thing at a time. Reading between 1000 and 1500 RPM, showing 55. See if we can open the choke slide a little. I would say that the relief valve opens at about 60 psi by the look of that. I'm not going to rev it too hard from a cold start, but we'll run it up to 3000 RPM indicated and see what pressure we got there now. Obviously those sort of readings will drop as the engine warms up. We've already seen what they can drop to. So cold, 3000 RPM is showing 60 psi with that oil in it, but we've already seen what that can drop to when the engine's warm. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the oil, and with that oil in then I'll start it and warm it right up, and we'll see what sort of readings we get with it, obviously starting from cold and through to fully warmed up. Well, I've now just completed an oil change on this machine and taken out what the owner informs me was a Halford's 2050 oil, and I've put in some Morris's 2050 that I had here. We've already seen the experiment I did comparing how quickly or slowly the two types of oil move compared to each other. So once again, I only ran the engine for as long as we saw it running there earlier, and it's since cooled right down. So I'm going to start it up again, see what sort of oil pressure readings we get, and I'll warm it right up as well, and then we'll come back to it when it's hot and see what we got. But this will be from cold with after the oil change. Showing 2000 RPM, 60 psi. We dropped to about 1500 earlier with the other oil in, so let's do that. I think we could already be making progress here. We've got 55 psi at 1500 rpm, and then it dropped lower than that. There we are. The engine probably won't quite tick over yet. It seems to need a good warm up before it will tick over, so I'm holding the throttle. So we're at a sort of fast tick over speed there, I guess. We're still clear of 50 psi. We go up to 3000 rpm. We didn't see that before because remember I mentioned I thought the relief valve was opening at 60. So at 3000 rpm it showed 60 psi with the old oil in it. 3000 now. We're near 70. I think this is looking promising. I think that oil change might clinch this. I'm going to warm the engine up anyway, and we'll come back to it hot. Yeah, it's ticking over now. Showing just shy of 50 psi and an indicated 1000 rpm. I know it wasn't doing that before. So I won't bore everybody with about 20 minutes or so of warming this engine up and running it. We'll come back to this and see what we've got in a short while. But I think that looks promising. Right, well I can assure anybody watching that this engine is now hot. And here's the service bulletin. Just to recap. We're looking for 40 to 45 psi with the engine running between 3000 and 4000 rpm. So let's see what we've got this time since we've changed the oil. Casual observation suggests that it's probably improved somewhat. Ticking over now. Like I say, the engine is very hot. Right, well we're not showing much there, but I'm not too worried about that. Hopefully it'll be enough to hold the oil light off. But more importantly, let's take it up to 3000 rpm. That's grabbed us at least 5 psi, I would say. tick over. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to remove the gauge, or possibly even leave it on, take it for a run and see what sort of readings we might get after a run. And then if things look favourable, I'll remove the gauge and reconnect the light and see what happens to that. So that's the next part of the plan. But I do seem to have managed to grab a few pounds of oil pressure there, so hopefully that might be all we need. Taking things to the next stage with this BSA Thunderbolt, I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a short ride on it and see how it goes and behaves, and also see what sort of readings we're getting on that gauge when we get back, and go from there, and then possibly do a similar run with the gauge removed and the oil pressure light reinstated and see how that goes. But first trip with the oil pressure gauge, and we'll take a look at it when we get back. Right, let's take a run on this BSA A65 and see how it behaves, and take a look at the oil pressure on that gauge when we get back. I've also, before riding this, I made adjustments to the ignition timing, which was way over retarded. The owner said that it was lacking power. Well, it was about 10 or 15 degrees too retarded, so I put that right. I've also tightened one or two loose things about the bike. In fact, the bottom bolt on the shock absorber on the other side fell out while I was running the engine checking the oil pressure. So I've been around some of the fixtures and fittings to try and make it a little safer than it was, perhaps. Anyway, let's see how it goes and see what oil pressure we might have when we get back. the centre stand touching down. I'll have to watch out for that. Just going to be careful on the left-handers with that stand touching down. I've got to say the bike didn't inspire me with confidence. There's something clanking and clattering when you go round corners, making clanky, scrapey noises. I thought it might have been the stand, but I'm not entirely sure, so I'm going to have a good look over the bike as well. But let's start it up again quickly and see what sort of oil pressure we might be seeing. I'll get my camera into my hand. .40 psi at 4,000 rpm, so that does actually fall within the recommended figures now. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and have my lunch, then I'm going to reconnect the oil pressure light switch, check around the bike to see what's been clanking and putting me off when I've been cornering, and we'll have another run on it. Basically, if we can do a similar run to that and come back with no oil light at tick over, that'll be fine. Hopefully that's what we'll get. But I'm also going to have a look around the bike and see what's scaring me with those clanky sort of scrapey noises I was getting, especially when I hit bumps on corners. Not very confidence inspiring at all, that. Anyway, round 2 will commence shortly. Okay, now I've got the gauge removed and I've got the oil pressure light switch reinstated. I'm going to do the same circuit as I did before with the oil pressure gauge fitted, and see if the oil light might hopefully stay off. I realise that we've got various rattles, like the fuel tank. I've tightened it down but it's not fitted too well. I can look at things like that afterwards, but I want to get to the bottom of this oil light business if I can, and worry about details like that afterwards if the owner wants me to. Let's see if we can go round that loop and come back and see the oil light out. Also, the centre stand may be the wrong one for this bike. I think that could be decking out a little bit early. Get my fuel on. Yes, ignition on obviously. Let's go. Charlie. Oh. Well, I had rather hoped we weren't going to see that. But there it is. Well, that's a disappointment to say the least. I'll just take my helmet off. It was running well there. I thought that we'd possibly crack that, but obviously we haven't. Well, that's the engine, fully rebuilt, like I say, with new big ends. The time inside bush and journal were well within limits. Brand new oil pump, but it was a so-called Hepalite oil pump. The origins of which I'm not sure, but the SRM oil pumps weren't available at the time, and I was assured that they were good. So I spoke to the owner and we fitted one of those, but maybe that's the key. I really can't understand what else it might be. I really don't think it's anything that's that I've done mechanically with the engine, because it's all in good shape. Anything that might have needed replacing was, and yet we've got this. So I'll speak to the owner. We might well end up having to go in there, take a look at the oil pump and see what's going on. That's disappointing to say the least. Now, the last run I took on this BSA A65 I filmed, and it was since I changed the oil that was in it, which was reportedly Halford's 2050 oil according to the owner. I changed it to Morris's 2050, and cold, I actually got an increase in oil pressure of around 10 psi. It went up to 70 at 2,500 RPM as opposed to 60 cold. But I took it for a ride, and with the oil pressure light switch reinstated, and when I came back, ticking over, the oil light was on again, which was rather disappointing. I videoed the trip, but unfortunately in my haste we didn't see anything of the road in front of us, and only the sort of tops of houses and trees and the sky, so it wasn't a very successful video. But this ride I'm going to make sure I get a better camera angle, and obviously I've got the Morris's 2050 oil in it. The bike's only done the one circuit of what we're about to do that's been missed on video, but as well as the new oil, I've also fitted a new oil pressure light warning switch, just to hopefully rule out any possible issues with that. So I'm going to go for a ride now, the usual route up to the next village, down the hill, turn right at the bottom onto the main road, down the roundabout, round a roundabout, and come home. And we'll see. The oil light may well be still on at tick over, but you never know, it might just not be. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'll get my helmet and jacket and stuff on, and we'll go and have a ride and see if by some miracle perhaps the oil light might stay off. But if anyone wants to place their bets, please do so. I'm not really going to put any money on it, but let's see what happens. Right, let's take a short ride and see if there's any change regarding the oil pressure light on this BSA A65. If not, I think we'll have to go in as far as the oil pump at least and see what's going on. But let's see if the oil pressure light happens to stay off when I come back with the warm engine. The fuel tank should be a little bit less rattly this time as well, although there's more work to do on that to secure it better. But on some other occasions I've run the engine and ridden the bike, the tank has rattled and clattered around quite a bit because it wasn't properly secured. That's something I'll continue to work on once I'm out the woods with this oil warning light issue. ticking over and the oil light is out. I have to say I wasn't expecting that. That's a pleasant surprise. There it is on. Well, to say I'm pleasantly surprised is an understatement. I really wasn't expecting that, but that is such good news, and it just goes to show, never overlook the obvious. The oil I put in there is slightly more viscous than what came out, and a change of oil pressure switch has knocked the oil light out, because in my last run, where I was looking up at the sky, I may well edit all that out and just put the start and finish of that ride in, but when I came back the oil light was on until I opened up to about 2000 RPM, and I hadn't gone at that short straight stretch that I went at past my turning on that run, so I went a bit further and a bit faster on this one, and the oil light's going off. Good news indeed, and some happy news for the owner too, I would think.